Today we have David Norona, one of my greatest friends. I love this guy, adventure buddy. He has been incredible to see the things he's done in Hollywood, Broadway. But I want to introduce you, David Norona.
Good to be with you, man.
Now, first question.
Yeah.
What's your most suppressed desire?
I should have done my homework. Wow. I think one of the things that I think I'm going after that might honestly be a little bit suppressed is I think I've always dreamt of writing books.
Really?
Several in my lifetime. And so it's either repressed, suppressed, or just I'm rationalizing my busyness.
What kind of books?
For me, I think the itch that I have right now, and this has been for a while, is I love story. If you know me for like 30 seconds flat, I joke that it'll probably be written on my epitaph. I'm obsessed with storytellers, whether that's film or dance or screenplays or you name it. Like, I'm just kind of obsessed with stories. So I have this whole series of ideas that I want to communicate before I leave the planet about the meaning of story and the importance of story and how human beings are actually storytelling creatures. Couple things human beings seem to have to do on a daily basis: breathe, drink water, eat. We've got to do that a couple times. And I've had a realization that maybe the close fourth or fifth activity is story. We just don't see it that way. But if you think about how much social media we consume, how much episodic TV on streamers, the fact that we're actually using a food term like binge to watching, I think tells me how important story is to human beings.
I never thought of that.
Yeah. I think it goes back to, there's a bigger conversation around our design and why we love story, maybe the why behind it, but I know what we do know, which is that we need it because there are some people who would tell you that story is the way that we organize the way we see the world. It helps us process things, which is like why for many people, Joseph Campbell, this kind of geeky mythology dude, when he looked at Star Wars for the first time when it came out in theaters and we saw kids and especially boys lining up, he actually equated the movie theater to church.
Yep.
That it was a sacred space. And I think what makes it sacred is we're trying to figure out life. And sometimes human beings do that by watching other people figure things out, specifically crazy superhero type stuff.
Right.
So,
I'm just thinking right now, I just left an appointment where I was in a house. And it's a guy I've been talking to, his good friend, been talking to him about buying a home and the reason why you want to buy a house, bring it back to why you want to buy a house a year.
Yep.
And he said, I'm sorry, I just don't get it. And I just saw this lost look in his eye and I said, inside, I didn't think this through, but I went, I'm going to tell you a story. And I said, all right, here's how it works. You buy your first primary residence. And I took him through the story for 10 years, what that looks like. And he goes, oh, that's what I need to do. This is a very smart person who's heard me talk about this many times. But when I put it in a story, I saw him go, bing.
Yep.
So really good point.
It's how we understand things. So when we go to, and specifically important things, I can tell you, hey, pick me up at 9:30, in the morning. I've got to get to an appointment, right? Wife, husband, we provide each other with information all the time. And giving each other information through sticky notes and all of that stuff, it works. But narrative or story, fancy word for story, is actually the best, stickiest way for human beings to get important things.
Right.
And we don't totally understand why that is scientifically, but we do know factually that it's kind of inarguable. That is just the way that people get information. And if you want somebody to remember something, tell them a great story with the idea in the story, and they won't forget it.
Right. I think of my teachers in school, history teachers.
Yep.
To be a lousy history teacher, you got to be a lousy teacher. It's in the name of the class. History.
That's it.
Story.
Yeah.
I had some teachers in school who were teaching the most boring subjects and were incredible because they wrapped it into story.
That's right. And if the thing that and so if it's not just the thing that you want to communicate to the people, but if what you did in buying a house, if I can put you in the story, because it turns out that when human beings watch things, they automatically, this happens psychologically, and we know this from psychologists, they do this thing called projection. So the reason why I watch hero movies with Matt Damon is because secretly, I guess maybe suppressed
Wanna be.
desires, is you want to be that guy. You want to
Yeah.
be the badass who's like fighting the bad guys or saving the girl or getting the girl or whatever, getting the prize or the trophy or whatever it is. And the thing that happens psychologically that a lot of people don't realize is I become, for 40 minutes, 30 minutes, 120 minutes, I become Matt Damon on some level. And if you don't believe me, then I dare you to not look at your heart rate or the emotions that you feel.
Right.
Because those tell me that you've actually put yourself in that moment. So that thing that you did with the potential home buyer to say, hey, let me put you in the story, that'll probably change them.
Right. Well, it's funny because that's what happened. I said, all right, you live in your house and you're renting it for this period of time. The value of that house that you're paying for that other guy, he just gained $200,000 worth of equity. Mm-hmm. You didn't own a house. You gained no equity, and you actually paid his mortgage off.
That's right.
And then I did that 10 times. And now, after 10 years, you own nothing, mm-hmm. and these other people own everything.
That's a sad story, JR. You told him a sad story.
I did. I hit hard.
No, but you know what's good is like you told him a story that on some level, in a good way, is painful. One that hopefully he doesn't actually want to live in.
Right.
But the problem is day to day, we don't always see the story that we're
that
living
donut I'm eating every day, oh, it tastes so good. You don't see it like instantly.
Your wife does. But you...
No, it's like that fat dog.
Yeah.
You don't see your own dog get fat, but you go to your friend's house like, man, your dog's fat.
We're talking about animals, right? Not our wives. I just want to make sure that
just
you're not
wives.
getting me in trouble.
No, just wives.
Because the story I tell my wife is she looks great in every damn outfit. I know that's the story I'm supposed to tell JR, and you're not going to get me off that topic.
Well, you're safe. In your wife's situation, you're safe. Both our wives, we're safe.
That's right. That's right. Well, I'm curious, man, like, because I know you've told me a little bit about this house per year, and like I have some experience in real estate. I still feel new to the game. I own 10 properties, but I can't say I've ever bought 10 houses a year. And I have to be honest and tell you that every time you tell me that story about that possibility, I get like a little bit nervous. I go like, gosh, that sounds like either intense or risky. So like, I'm personally very curious as to how that works.
So don't buy 10 houses a year. Okay. That will freak you out.
Eat one donut a year.
Buy a house a year.
Yes.
And the same way that you get fat eating a donut a day, you can get financially fat.
Yeah.
Buying a house a year.
Okay.
And it's not a major accomplishment. Really, all you're doing is buying a primary residence home.
Okay.
Primary residence home, there's a lower down payment.
Yep.
Lower interest rate, lower cost overall.
I got one of those.
And it's really easy.
Yep.
Now, the challenge for you and me who have kids and,
Right.
that are a little older is how do you uproot those kids and move to the next primary residence house?
Oh, I see. So okay. Is this for the what is it, the capital gains or the whatever? Are you trying to avoid, like, are you going every 2 years? No, you're saying every year.
Every year.
Okay.
So the lending rules say you can't buy a house, a primary residence within 12 months.
Okay.
So they don't want people just going out and buying a bunch of properties that they're not really the primary residence.
I see.
So they expect you to live in the house for a year.
Okay.
And then you buy another house with the same rules as the primary residence. Because the down payment's smaller, interest rate's smaller, it's way less expensive. So when you go to rent that property,
oh, you've got it locked in.
Yeah.
Your
costs are locked in. No, and you know day one. Like when I go out with clients, say, well, this property will rent for about this much.
Yeah.
This much. Your payment's going to be this much. You're already profitable. Let's say you're a family and you're just getting started. You and your wife, you got your first child.
Yeah.
Well, if your child's 10 years old and has moved once a year,
yeah.
Okay, no big deal.
Yeah.
Do it.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. So like on that, because my brain's already kind of going. We've got a great loan. Like, I mean, I think we nabbed like a sub 3% or something.
Don't sell that house.
Yeah. No, it's the cheapest money I've ever found. But here's my question. How do you handle market shifts? I mean, clearly we didn't buy one primary, we didn't use this strategy that what you're describing of moving every year and doing this kind of stuff. So now I think we've been there, I don't know, 5 to 7 years. I did refi once. I lowered it down to 20 because I didn't want to reset and lose all the interest payments and stuff like that. So I think we owed like 24, 25 years. And so when we refied it, I said to my wife, if we're going to do that, then I want to actually reset it down to 20. So I don't have to like restart the clock on all the interest that I'd. So we did that. I think we're about maybe 7 years in. We've got a sub 3 on it. But here's my question. Like, so we got a great price on the house. We got a great interest rate that I don't want to lose. Well, those are locked.
Right.
But now, at least here in Northern California, in Redding, there's been a big leap in the last 7 years.
Right.
How do you handle both them, the change in interest rate and increase in the overall like market value of homes? Does it matter?
Yes.
Okay.
So you want to buy strategically, and that's where we come in to help.
Right.
Making sure that the property you buy is going to rent for more than what your payment is.
Okay. Do you think that with, and this happens a lot in California, where there's some pretty big price swings in the market.
Yeah.
Is there any time that if you were on this plan of 10 houses, 1 per year, primary residence strategy that you've laid out, is it ever possible that you're kind of like, ooh, yeah, we're gonna need to wait, like buying this year if the market's super hot is not a good idea?
It's always about cash flow.
Okay, I see.
If it cash flows, it's a win. If it's not a cash flow, wait a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But there's always, thank goodness for my industry and my career, there's always a good deal every day.
Really?
Always.
Wow.
When I first started in real estate 31 years ago, I was so frustrated because I missed out on this deal for a client. And I thought, oh, there won't be another one. Sure enough, and tomorrow there's another one.
Yeah.
And it took me about 6 months to figure out, you know what, every day, every week, there's another good deal.
Wow.
Good thing, because I would be out of business if there wasn't.
So what I'm hearing you say is, all right, you've got this strategy of 1 house per year. You use the primary residence thing where you lock in the lower down payment, the lower interest rates, which you usually get on average for sure compared to an investment. I mean, I think on some of our investment stuff, it's not uncommon for the interest rate to sometimes be double.
I don't even care
Okay.
anymore about interest rate.
Really?
It doesn't matter because it's just calculated. What is the cash flow?
Meaning the rentability or the rental cost of the house. Do you find that so here's a question. It's a little bit above my pay grade, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you find that if home prices, like if the sales market is hot, how does the rental market move in relation to that? Like if I'm a renter, am I also going to see rental prices go up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Of simplifying the story because I don't want them to get caught up in the details of the interest rate and the prices of homes and this and that and inflation and the Federal Reserve. And there's a lot of confusion about it.
Sure.
It's as simple as this.
Okay.
When I buy this house, I'm going to have a certain amount of expenses. Will those expenses be less than the rent? It's that. Is there cushion?
Yep.
And if there is a cushion, here's the beautiful part of this game. I've done projections on 4% growth.
Versus the historical average, which is 6 or 7%.
It's about 5.
Is it 5?
Right, about 5.
Okay.
Equity on a property.
Okay.
So just 4%. If you bought a house a year for the next 10 years, your monthly income, just the income, I'm not talking about anything else, but the difference between what the house costs you every month
and what somebody's paying for.
Yep.
The cash flow.
That cash flow would be an income of $100,000 a year.
Really? Not to mention the equity and
we're not talking about that.
Value of the portfolio.
Because that's $1.2 million.
Oh, yeah. Easy.
Well, think about that.
Yeah.
What job out there will give you a retirement of $1.2 million
Not the one I
and
have.
an income of 100, but it gets better.
Okay.
In 5 years, your boss doubles your salary.
Oh, wow. Because you go from $100,000 cash flow to
200
$200,000. And then the market value of the house has got to,
It goes to $2 million. And what retirement of that, which company gives you a retirement plan and says, oh yeah, first in 10 years, you'll have 1.2, then it'll be 2, then it'll go to 3. Where is that?
Wow.
This is why what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
it's for the turtle. It's the rabbit and the turtle.
What's funny is all of the animals that got this figured out, they're super unsexy and slow. We're gonna have to work on that. Maybe we can get like the logo guy to just come up with a really badass looking turtle that's got a cool hat, and sunglasses or something. No, because I get it. It's funny. I was talking to another friend of mine who who's actually in the mortgage business, and it's funny because I always try to pay attention to when I'm hearing the same advice or counsel or strategy in lots of different ways.
Yeah.
Because then for me, that becomes like a pretty robust pattern to pay attention to. Like it's maybe potentially cool if somebody that you respect tells you a thing. But when 2 or 3 or 4 people, because one of the questions that he asked me was, he said, if you looked back, this was in the context of finances, but other things as well, what would you tell your younger self about this stuff? And what I said was, now at the time I was actually somewhat responding also to acting. What would I have told that young guy looking back?
Yeah.
And I wish that I would have not bought into the lottery mentality of getting it all big and fast.
Yeah.
Because for me, that was my relationship with my career as an actor. Is I'm going to land the big show and it'll solve all my financial problems. Now, I was never a full-on idiot with money, but what I didn't appreciate was that if I had just done things methodically, very intentionally, almost in a way kind of boring, of like, hey, I'm just going to stick to this plan. When I booked my first show with Josh Brolin, also known as Thanos in these things, if I had I bought my first house off of that.
Yeah.
Because I made TV money. I was making a lot of money per week. So we made the good, right first decision, which was to buy our first house in LA.
Yep.
That house, which was a 3-1 built in the 50s, that we then fixed up and invested in or whatever. I mean, I think we ended up selling it. We like for $200,000 a handful of years later, which was not a bad return at all on that thing.
What would it rent for today?
Oh my God. Well, I'll tell you what it would sell for today is $750,000 plus.
So you think about that and the rents you'd be getting monthly.
Insane.
So probably 13, man, that's good money.
It's crazy money.
That could be $13,000 a month.
But what encourages me is that I think people may be feeling, I know I do sometimes, of like, oh, it's too late for me. But what you've just described, because it can be done in 10 years.
Yeah.
You can do some real, even if you only did it for 5, that's better than
You're
nothing.
still a millionaire
After
5.
Which is encouraging to me because I think often a lot of people, I don't know if you deal with this when you go out and you talk to them, they feel like maybe it was too late.
Everybody says that. I feel like that. Now, I've made some serious mistakes and out of good heart. Yeah. So that's the other thing. People have made a lot of mistakes, and not because they're idiots. Mm-hmm. Well, I did, but
me too.
But overall, I got advice from people,
right,
who were good-natured and awesome. And I don't want to mention any names, but Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey is awesome, and he helped me stay out of consumer debt.
Right.
He didn't help me learn how to use the industry's debt model for my profit.
Yes. And I hear you there because I think for a lot of people, and I didn't know this, but a lot of people are even scared to buy their first house because they think, oh my gosh, I owe this 90% thing, not really fully understanding that actually maybe a better way of thinking about it is somebody else is giving you money to go buy this thing.
Yeah.
Which is different than like a credit card debt.
Right.
Where they're not giving you anything other than taking another 17 to 21% of those pairs of shoes that you just bought.
Right.
Yeah.
Why people are afraid of real estate, they heard about 2008. 2008. So why were those people idiots? Well, back then, they were getting 4 or 5 homes on a McDonald's income. Mm-hmm. So, yes, you didn't. If you had done the one house a year club, you had still owned all those properties.
They shouldn't have ever. Listen, by the way, I was almost one of those idiots.
Yeah.
So I've never shared this story with you, but I was going in with a family member who actually had done really, really well and is doing very, very well. But we got hit by that shell game because what happened was I had my house in LA. I had some TV money. He says, hey, let's buy this lot and let's build this property. Now, this wasn't just a normal property. This was like we bought, like I think at the time in that market, it was a $500,000 lot with a view of the Strip. And we were going to build a 3,000-4,000 square foot home or some gargantuan McMansion or something like this. truth be told, I was way in over my head. There's no way the bank nor I should have ever gotten approved for that thing. But what I hear you say is that's not what you're saying. What you're saying is you're going to buy a house that you could actually afford.
Yep.
Because it's the type of house that you could actually live in as your primary residence, which is highly different than like one of these speculative rackets.
Buying 5 houses and you don't have the revenue paying for it, and they're not rented yet. So these guys, and this happened to so many people. Sure. This is why we had a tidal wave of foreclosures, because people own 5 homes they shouldn't have bought.
Right.
They're fully leveraged, 100%, some 110%. Well, now the value of them dropped in half.
Right.
Rents actually went up at that time. So a lot of them should have tried to rent them. But there were guys I know who kept their properties. They lost, air quotes, lost money, but they didn't sell it. So they didn't really lose. But their rents were going up, so they kept them.
Wow. And now they're doing all right.
Right. And this is the game. It's the rental cash flow game. Now, if you can keep the cash flow going, you're great.
And so that's the main, what I hear you say is the main decision point or decision, making point is that if you can actually afford the house and it looks like a house that you could actually live in as your primary residence, which you said up front, and if you were to buy another property and have to rent out that other house, house number 1, house number 2, that as long as you can rent it for more than what the mortgage is, you're all right.
Done.
I get it.
I got a picture for you.
Okay.
There's a picture of you on stage with the guy from Lion King.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Can you explain that to everybody?
So I think what you might be referring to is my Broadway debut in The Buff. Is this what we're talking about? Yeah. So I did a show when I was, this was back, in 94, 95, which probably would have been the last year anybody would want to see me naked other than my wife. I was just graduated from college, and I was doing this show. That was about a group of friends and 3 summer holidays, and it was by Terrence McNally, who actually just passed away. He wrote some killer pieces. One with a film was made with Michelle Pfeiffer and Pacino. So they wrote this play, and one of the actors in it was epileptic, and they were getting the medication calibrated, and I was an understudy, meaning like I was his backup. And he had an epileptic seizure just off stage. He started to have a grand mal seizure, which is the ones that you shake. So I literally ran down from the 2nd-story balcony and realized that I was going on. However, we just moved the show from off-Broadway to Broadway. I'd never even tried the wardrobe or the costumes on, and I'd never actually rehearsed on that stage, which was the Walter Kerr stage, this big deal kind of Broadway stage. And there in the wings, in the stairwell, the actor was having a seizure. And while this thing that looked out of it was out of a TV show was happening, there was an ambulance called. They asked for doctors to come back there. The stage manager turns to me and says, get your costume on. And about 10 minutes later, it was like we hit play on the VCR. We walked on stage. We picked up where the scene had stopped.
Oh, wow.
I finished Act 1, but Act 2, here's the kicker. As if that hadn't been enough of, drama and adrenaline for an evening, I was about to step out on stage absolutely butt naked. And so I made my Broadway debut absolutely naked back in 1995.
Your parents were so proud.
Oh, they were so proud. My dad especially pointed at me and said, "That's my boy." No, I'm joking. Let's just say it was pretty cold out there. Dana. We'll leave on that sad note. To joke, it was a cold night on Broadway. Cold night on Broadway.
And you've done other things like Jack Ryan and other things you've done.
Yeah, that was another one where I had to. I wasn't fully naked, but this is another funny story. So we're shooting it in Colombia. I'm traveling from Northern California from Redding to Colombia, which takes about 24 to 36 hours door to door. There were days where I had my 3 meals in 3 different countries within 24 hours. And anyway, so I had this big scene that I had auditioned with, and usually the scenes kind of sort of stay the same. And so in the audition version of the scene, I was playing on a beach, dressed in linen, being the Latin man that I was cast to be, playing baseball. Yeah, exactly.
Racist.
Stereotype, totally. Linen. Stupid Latin clothing. But anyways, I'm playing baseball and playing catch with my boy on the beach. Okay, so you shoot everything out of order. And I was part of 6 out of the 7 episodes or whatever it was. And so honestly, they're rewriting all the time. But I'm not paying attention to all these pages they're emailing me because 90% of the time, they're not my scenes.
Right.
You know, and actors are all self-absorbed. So if it doesn't have to do with me, I'm not paying attention to it. So anyways, one day I'm like, oh gosh, my big scene is coming up with John Krasinski and Michael, you know, from House of Cards and The Office. And so I'm like, oh gosh, I should go look at that scene again. So it was like 2-3 days away. And I look at the pages and I realize there's little asterisks whenever they put these little stars on all the lines that have changed. And I look at the email and I'm seeing lots of little asterisks. And I'm like, oh crap, I've got to read this. And suddenly there's no wife, there's no boy. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, they've totally rewritten this. So I start reading the scene and it says, my character's name was Jose Marzan. Jose Marzan emerges from the ocean, water dripping down his shirtless chest. And I was like, shit, sorry, closed the computer, went to the gym and started working out because I'm thinking 3 days from now, I'm going to have to be shirtless on freaking Netflix. And that, I didn't care about the scene. I didn't care whether I did good acting. I was just like, and so there was this funny moment where I literally like went manorexic for like 24 hours. Like I didn't eat breakfast that day. I totally went to shredding and cutting. And all I did was work out for like 3 hours before I came out. So this was a funny moment. Michael, who's the actor from House of Cards, I come out and they say, hey, Mr. Noroña, can we have you on set? And my wardrobe was no shirt. So I walk out on set and from like 100 yards away, we had kind of become a bit friendly. He's like, holy F, you're totally effing cut, you son of a... Off stage, I wasn't prepping. I wasn't doing deep acting exercises. I just kept doing push-ups and sit-ups for 3 hours. I don't know how much good it did, but it made me feel more in control. So anyways, those are my 2 half-naked stories.
What's your most embarrassing moment on the stage? Where's a big flub up where you're like, that really happened?
I'll tell you the biggest one, and it was actually on a TV set. So there used to be a show called NYPD Blue.
Yep.
It was one of the first gritty cop shows and whatever. And it was Steven Bochco, who is a genius, but he had a reputation, not that he was ever this way to me, he had this reputation to be pretty intense. So you knew that you wanted to kind of steer clear, not get on Steven's bad side. So I had like a guest spot. Again, I was playing this guy. Actually, I still remember the character's first name. His name was Gabe. Latin, drug dealer. Totally racist. And and so I'd love to say that that's true, but actually I grew up in Miami in the 80s and everybody was selling cocaine. So I think it's kind of sort of true. But anyway.
Along with the Bears.
Along with the cocaine bears, that's right. So here's what was funny. I had to smoke, but I wasn't a smoker. So in homage to my teenage dad who smoked Marlboro Reds, I decide a week before shooting the scene that I'm going to get all methody and start smoking Marlboro Reds. So I grab a pack of cigarettes, and on TV and on film, you got to know when you're doing things. Otherwise, like your hand will be up, your hand will be down, your hand will be
right,
down.
yeah.
So you got to plan. It's called continuity. You have to plan when you're doing your physical actions. And so I knew that for me not to jack up the editor, I would have to know when I was smoking and all that kind of stuff. So I was living in LA at the time in this dinky little apartment, hadn't bought my primary residence yet, and I decide that I buy the pack at cigarettes and I walk around the block and I practice where I'm going to do things. All right, so on the day, what would happen is these leads have been doing the show for so long that oftentimes they didn't have the dialogue memorized because they'd shot for 14 hours the day prior. Like, it's like a soap opera. Like they just have tons of stuff. So what they do is one of the leads was literally learning their lines while we were shooting the scene. And for me to practice smoking, I decided to start smoking when I was off camera. So we shoot the master, the big shot with everybody in it. We shoot their close-up, then the second lead's close-up. This entire time, I'm smoking one full cigarette every single take.
Ooh.
We break for lunch. I've already smoked over a pack of cigarettes in 4 hours, and I'm not a smoker. And then I decide, this is genius on my part, I decide to eat a tuna sandwich.
Oh.
So I eat a tuna sandwich. I go back on set. I'm now breaking into the second pack of cigarettes, and the blonde who has this husky voice, who was a smoker, she looks at me and she's like, sweetie, are you okay? You're looking a little green. I'm like, I'm good. I'm good. So they call action. I go out on set, and now it's my close-up. Finally, after 6 hours of shooting, it's my close-up. They get to me, and I'm smoking a cigarette and doing the whole thing, and she's like, Gabe, I know you had drugs in there. I know you got drugs in that backpack. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, I'm sorry. I turn and I vomit an entire tuna sandwich all over the female lead's shoes. Then I turn in the other direction and vomit the rest of the tuna sandwich all over his feet. And shortly thereafter comes Steven Bochco, the guy that I wasn't supposed to piss off. So Jimmy Smits, we would know from a lot of things. From that show, he was famous. He's been in Star Wars, a bunch of movies. He's in the makeup trailer the next day with Steven Bochco. Now, I'm trying to be invisible as they put on my makeup, and this is the day after the vomit. And all of a sudden, Steven Bochco turns to me and he's like, so, how are you feeling this morning? And I realized, oh my gosh, they told Steven Bochco I vomited tuna sandwich over 2 of his leads in his entire set. So, by far, that is my most embarrassing moment ever.
That's so awful.
And here's a coda. I had smoked so much, I didn't know this, but I had nicotine poisoning.
Oh, no.
And I got home, and you can actually die from that. And I was literally starting to have muscle seizures because I had so much nicotine in my system. I didn't know, but I actually could have freaking died. So, not embarrassing.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So there you go, buddy.
What is something you have a strong opinion about and you wish you could talk about, but you're afraid you'd get canceled?
I see what you're doing there. Wow. I think
Get this off your chest.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's one, and this is a really personal one. And I actually remember having this before social media because I'm 50 years old. So, this would have come back from the 80s and stuff. So here's one that's a little bit kind of heartfelt, maybe serious for the context of the podcast, but something that I'm super passionate about is life and the value of life. And this comes from the fact that I had teenage parents. So my dad was 15 and my mom was 17 when I was born. Statistically speaking, I should have been aborted. Statistically speaking, they were Hispanic. So if you look at stats,
right,
teenage Hispanic parents at the age of 15 and 17 should not be keeping the baby. And I remember sitting in high school and this topic coming up and everybody having lots of opinions about it. And then all of a sudden it hit me for the first time. I'm like, what you guys don't realize is you're actually talking about me. I would be erased from this planet according to your thinking and your stats. Now, listen, I'm not trying to speak for everybody in every situation. It's a bigger hot button conversation, but here's what I do know. I wouldn't exist. There's at least a handful of people that are glad that I do.
Yep.
And I think that I hope before I go, I've been able to do things on this planet that actually would matter and count for something. So the way that I always approach this subject, because I know that it's sensitive for a lot of people, is hey, I can't talk for everybody, but I'm allowed to talk for me.
Yeah.
And
my body, my choice.
And I'm glad I wasn't erased.
Yeah.
By your thinking about whether or not I'm worth being alive.
What's interesting you say that. This set would be empty right now because I was born in a situation that should have been aborted.
Wow.
It very clearly that conversation was brought up.
Wow.
So this set could be empty right now.
Well, yeah.
And everything you and I have done in our life
would go away.
Yep. That's a crazy thought.
It is a crazy thought. It is a crazy thought. And I think oftentimes with these hot button things, I think we're talking about ideas and we forget that there's people attached.
Yeah.
People who love, people who actually accomplish things. I get it. And I get that teenage parents having kids, it's difficult. My mom made huge sacrifices. My Cuban grandfather, who, was the patriarch of the family and who I love, he was deeply embarrassed at the time, culturally, in the 70s, for your teenage daughter to get pregnant. Culturally was so embarrassing. He told her that she had to quit school. They threw out the mattress where she got pregnant. But my mom, and I'm to this day, I'm so grateful that she was so strong. She told my dad and she told everybody. She's like, I don't care what any of you say or any of you do. I'm having this baby. And she fought for me. And she kept me secret for 6 months. Thank goodness it was the 70s. So she was wearing some floppy clothes and she kept it hidden. But, her Cuban grandmother kept giving her these big breakfasts. She would eat them and then go vomit in the bathroom because she was, she had morning sickness.
Wow.
And as a 17-year-old young girl, she made a really difficult decision. And at least for me and my family and and my mom, I'm super grateful that she chose that.
Our moms are amazing.
Total beasts.
So my mom raised me, went on to get a college degree.
Wow.
Worked for the state, worked as a secretary, ended up running the largest department in the state of Washington, second in command.
Wow.
Retired. Well, she can't be stopped, so she ran for city council. And then she went on to run the county, became county commissioner for like 2 or 3 terms.
Wow.
My mom's unstoppable. Yeah.
That kind of explains you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. She's, yeah, I may have picked some things up from
just a
her,
little bit.
and I'm very grateful for her. And imagine what all the problems that would be solved if dads showed up.
That's right.
And now, how can we make that happen? I have no answer for that.
Well, I mean, I think this is where the cycle has to be unbroken. And I think, by the way, not to artificially bring it back to the topic, but we do know this. When people are struggling financially and socially, economically, it's just freaking rough. And guys, unfortunately, a lot of them bail out because they're either scared or don't know how to provide, or they bail out because of the money thing. And we know statistically that property ownership is maybe the number one wealth builder for most of humanity.
Right.
And so this thing that you're talking about here right now, who knows? Maybe we solved all of the world's problems today.
Whoa. What's the worst advice you've ever been given?
Take your clothes off in a Broadway play. No. What's the worst advice I've ever been given? So I think the worst advice that I've ever been given is that you get rich quick. Because I think that lie impacted the way that I looked at my acting career. I think it made me feel ashamed when I wasn't. Either ashamed that I didn't take the risk and Johnny did get rich, because it, get rich quick schemes sometimes work. And
right.
So when you see your neighbor get, and then you're like, oh, I missed that boat. I missed that boat. I missed that boat. Now it's too late for me. So I think the inverse of that is, I think the best advice to conquer the worst advice is you can actually get rich more slowly.
Yeah.
Or not quickly.
So
yeah,
God is invisible. But how has this invisible God become real to you?
First of all, love's invisible too, and I know that it exists.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, whenever, and I have lots of friends that don't believe in God, or, some of which even love me but think I'm crazy for believing in Jesus. But I'm like, can you touch love? No, but it exists. And it exists because let's say you have a wife or a husband or a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever, or you have kids. I know love exists even though I can't touch it and feel it, because it makes itself manifest and visible in other ways. And I think for me, and there's this word that Christians use called testimonies, which is just a fancy Christian Bible word for story. I've got stories about what my God has done, and I know statistically that it is absolutely impossible that that thing happened, because the stats are against it.
Right.
There's just too many variables. There's too many reasons why that thing never. And by the way, here's another one. Did you know that when they looked at physics, at astrophysics, how the planets spin and all of this kind of stuff, there's like, I could be butchering this, but it's somewhere around 4, 5, 6 different variables in how the planets revolve and where the sun is and where we are and all this fancy pants physics stuff that I don't understand. But this is the part of this story that stuck with me. There's about 6 things that if they were even off by a fraction of a fraction of a fraction, this planet would not exist with life.
Right.
And when you crunch the numbers, again, math at a level that as an actor I never ever got to, it's so statistically impossible that these 6 numbers would line up that even atheistic physicists go, that's a rough one to wrap your head around.
It reminds me, there's the whole thing with the universe and the size and everything. So the universe had a big bang, just exploded. So there's a certain amount of weight. If it was too heavy, it would have just kept going. And if it was too light, it would have collapsed upon itself. The weight difference between one way or the other, do you remember what it was?
I don't.
A 5-cent coin.
That's insane.
And along the other lines, like prayer. So I had a friend come up to me. This last year, the market did some crazy things, and it was scary.
Sure.
And he said, I wanted you to know, like, I just heard this thought. I need to tell you. I think you get double for all your trouble. And I was like, okay, whatever.
You're like, that's cute.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's nice. It rhymes.
Yeah.
And then I thought about it a little while ago, and I'm like, wait, after he told me that, I sold these 2 houses across the street. I sold these other 2 houses around the corner from each other. They're identical. I sold these 2 medical buildings, 2 different sellers, 2 different buyers. And it's just like these 2s. Every transaction has been a 2. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. And it's been a time that I needed provision. I needed provision, like the manna that came down with Moses and the people of Israel in the desert. I needed that this year, and it came. Wow. So, I mean, how do you, that's impossible. The odds are impossible.
It is. They are. It's so I often think that's either weird or it's God. And I think sometimes we call things that we can't wrap our heads around weird. And I think for me, the journey I've been on is to actually, it's too flippant and too easy and too ungrateful for me to just call it weird.
Right.
I think I want to give, I was getting ready to talk at a conference once, and I was thinking about this super geeky thing about humanism, right? Which is basically the religion of being a human being, where we believe we're the center of the universe.
Yeah.
And I was on my way to talk at a Christian conference, and because I was teaching on the thing, I was still processing like my big idea. And I remember stopping at a stoplight, and I remember saying, well, God, what? I mean, you made us, so you already know we're kind of self-involved, and we kind of secretly think we're the center of the universe. So what's the big deal? And he says, I'll tell you what the big deal is. The big deal is that the creation is taking credit for what only the creator should be credited for.
Right.
And that notion is actually called plagiarism.
Ooh.
When we try to pass off something that belongs to somebody else, and we get pissed off when we copy and paste or take somebody's content online. Can you imagine being God and having all of your little characters that you author going, no, I wrote this, I created this? There's no other story ever told where the creatures that have been created try to actually take credit for the author's work. And that was a big turning point for me.
So with that, tell everybody how they can connect with you and ways that you can serve them.
Yeah, I mean, my itch is storytelling. So I often kind of express it as whether you're a preacher, a teacher, a dancer, a dreamer, any kind of storyteller. And I think secretly, by the way, we are all storytellers.
Yeah.
And you want to get better at it, you can go to davidnorona.com, and my friend and partner and I, and friend of yours as well, we're getting ready to launch our own podcast called Storia, which is about being a disruptive storyteller. And I think, ironically, that's what you're doing today. Is I think you're trying to help people disrupt the story of their financial future. And I don't think there's anything more important than getting people out of the old story and getting them into the new one.
That's awesome. Go see their podcast. You got a school as well?
We do, yeah. Bethel Conservatory of the Arts. We've got programs in all of the arts. And so if you want to grow, or somebody, maybe some young kid that's about to graduate high school that has this dream, I get it. It's a scary industry to go in, but we've created a safe place for young artists to figure out 2 things: who they are, which is maybe the most important question we can answer about ourselves, and then who you want to be.
Right. So everybody's got to, if you're serious about the arts, acting,
filmmaking,
pretty much anything in the arts, you got to see David and Fab. These 2 are changing the world from here in Redding. They're the real deal.
Thanks, man.
David, that was awesome.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm JR, your real estate friend, and we'll see you in the next video.